Matthew Tkachuk is not going to be on the cover of NHL 24. So we asked the question, was he in fact snubbed?
Your Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
And welcome into this Wednesday, August 16th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez, and you can follow me on X at Monoman12. Follow the show account on X and Instagram at LO_FLA Panthers. And shout out to all the everydayers who come back here and get your daily Florida Panthers fix. So, Cats fans, it is... with the off season, it's a really once again another fun opportunity to discuss more of the things off the ice. But now for today's show, we're going to be talking about the video game NHL 24, and it's always such a big deal every single year on who's going to be on the cover, who's going to not be on the cover. We even spoke about a little bit of it last week of it if we are hoping that Matthew Tkachuk is going to be on the cover. But before we get to him not being on the cover, we are going to introduce today's guest here on the show. It is a Winans Wednesday, which means Jacob Winans is back here on the show. But Jacob, welcome back to Locked On Panthers.
Thanks for having me, as always. I love these off-season shows because we can get into some of these topics that aren't necessarily like the biggest deal, but we can spend some time on them, and this is definitely one I want to spend some time on.
Yeah, so like we said at the top, Matthew Tkachuk will not be on the cover of NHL 24. It was given to Colorado Avalanche defenseman Cale Makar, and it's funny because we've been talking about this for weeks, like we said, and even our friend David Rodriguez over at the FLA Cats Hockey Podcast, who does great Photoshop work, he put the photo of Matthew Tkachuk sliding after that game-winning goal against the Carolina Hurricanes in Game 4. And funny enough, for those who don't know, EA's headquarters is actually located in Orlando in Maitland. So you and I are actually not too far from their headquarters. So maybe we should actually knock on their doors and say a little bit of our opinions on whether Matthew Tkachuk was snubbed or not. But I do. A few days ago, I was saying that Matthew Tkachuk was in fact snubbed. But then I also look at the patterns of the guys who are on the cover, Jacob. And when it comes to players who have been on the cover or when it comes to them being on the cover, it's usually a year. Sometimes some of them have been a year before they have won a cup or a few years after. It hasn't always been immediate. So that's kind of what I'm getting at. Jay Fresh actually posted a tweet saying only 2 of the past 27 EA NHL cover players have made it past the first round in the same season. So it also goes to show it's not just a Madden curse. It's an NHL curse as well.
Yeah, so that makes me feel a little bit better about it. The EA curse is real. Cover athletes tend to either have injuries or not great seasons following being on the cover. So that helps me sleep at night when Matthew Tkachuk gets snubbed from being on it. But I think it was more annoying to me than it should have been that he wasn't picked, because it's not often that the perfect cover, the photo, the moment, they're put right in your lap. It was right there. It was the easiest possible choice you could have made. Matthew Tkachuk sliding on his knees, celebrating the biggest goal in the Florida Panthers history. This is Matthew Tkachuk, the best winger in the sport. Incredible personality, super marketable player, American born. This is it's a slam dunk, home run, easy win. and they completely fumbled it. And I don't understand how you can let that happen. I think that the moment, the picture, everything was right there in front of them for the taking. It was the easiest gift you could have given them. It's a pass to a breakaway on an empty net, and they missed the empty net. So it was annoying. It was a little bit annoying. I'm biased, of course. I'm a Panthers fan, but I'm also a really, really big fan of the EA NHL games. I know everyone hates on them, but that's the only hockey video game out there, and I've gotten every one since NHL 2002. And to give you some context, I was born in 2000, so I've had every NHL game since I was 2 years old. I didn't really know what I was doing until probably NHL 2007, but I have had every one since I was 2 years old. And it's a big deal for to be on that cover. It's an honor to the players, and I think Matthew Tkachuk deserved it. That's not to say Cale Makar is not deserving. He's probably the best defenseman in hockey. Super talented young guy. Won a Stanley Cup, won a Norris Trophy. I'm a big fan of his. But I can't. I really feel like this was the moment they could have put Matthew Tkachuk on it, and it would have been great. It would have been an epic cover shot. I was disappointed to see him not get it, but it is what it is. I'm still going to buy the game. I'm not going to be out here clamoring for, oh, well, forget EA, boycott them. Let's bring back NHL 2K. Those games were good too, but I'm still gonna buy the video game. I'm still gonna spend a ton of hours playing it, and maybe there will be a Matthew Tkachuk cover in the future. We'll see. But yeah, we got close this year. He's got to get one at some point.
I think there will be. That's the thing. I think there will be. And I think I'm looking at the list right now of guys who have been on the covers and who've had deep playoff runs or a few years after. Like Cale Makar's is coming 2 years after the Colorado Avalanche won the cup. But I also look at other guys who have gotten it 2 years after even being in the Stanley Cup, like Martin Brodeur. The last time the Devils were in the Stanley Cup final was 2012. He got it 2 years after. Same thing with the Boston Bruins with Patrice Bergeron. He's on the cover of NHL 15. It happened after they made it in 2013. A few exceptions to the rule. Jonathan Toews was there twice after the Chicago Blackhawks won. Vladimir Tarasenko was actually on the cover before the Blues won the cup as well. So Connor McDavid, because he was the best player on the planet the moment he entered the league. That one you have to get him at least within the first 5 years if he's exploding on the scene. And who knows what we'll see with Connor Bedard as well. And even Ovi, his was 3 years after he won the cup too. So so it just goes to show that an extended postseason run is not a criteria for EA to put someone on the cover of the game. So now looking at that trend, this is, at least in most situations, this is a not yet for Matthew Tkachuk, but possibly we can see him on the cover sometime.
Yeah, I just think he's too marketable of a superstar where he won't be there. I think the competition is going to be real. They tend to favor young players generally, for the most part. There are exceptions.
Trevor Zegras last year.
Exactly. Trevor Zegras, a guy who was relatively unproven but really marketable, had some spectacular highlight reel goals that really put his name out there. You think a guy like Jack Hughes will probably get it in the near future. Connor Bedard will absolutely get one in the near future. But Matthew Tkachuk should be right in that conversation. He's an established superstar. He's one of the best personalities in the league. He's a really marketable guy. And I think as far as recognizable names and recognizable talents, he's near the very top of that list. And yeah, I think it's just a matter of time. And I don't like seeing repeat cover stars like Austin Matthews has gotten it twice. Ovechkin, as much as Ovi is deserving of everything in hockey, he's gotten it twice. Jonathan Toews got it twice. I prefer to have someone new, keep the tradition rolling with a new athlete, give that honor to someone new every year. And I think Matthew Tkachuk is definitely in line. The Panthers have him for 7 more seasons. So we'll see how many Stanley Cups he raises over his head in that amount of time. And I'm sure there will be an EA cover somewhere in there as well.
Make it happen, EA. Make it happen for sure. But we're going to transition over to segment number 2, where we're going to discuss something that is changing in one of the junior hockey leagues. And we're going to discuss whether that change is going to transition and make its way over to the NHL eventually. We're going to discuss that and more here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. But first, we're going to tell you all about FanDuel. And football season is about to kick off, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to win all season long, because right now when you bet a Super Bowl winner, you can get bonus bets every time they win in the regular season. Just pick any team to win the Super Bowl and you'll get bonus bets for every victory. You can use your bonus bets on spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and start earning bonus bets with America's #1 sportsbook. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Segment number 2 here on this Wednesday, August 16th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day, here with Jacob Winans on another Winans Wednesday. And Jacob, so this actually happened last week on August 10th, where the QMJHL, and this was something that was rumored for a while, as far as taking out fighting in their games, and this is actually what the QMJHL actually released, and I'm gonna read it. Quote: "In order to prevent physical and psychological violence that may result in minor or serious injury, or in extreme circumstances, death, the QMJHL is responsible for establishing rules and interventions when a fight occurs between 2 or more people during a game, regardless of whether they are players or other team members." I'm going to skip a little bit. "The QMJHL will ensure that sanctions mentioned for the following paragraphs are applied. As soon as a fight occurs, those engaged will be systemically ejected from the game. Any player found to have instigated the fight will receive an automatic 1-game suspension. The person declared to be the aggressor during the fight will receive a minimum of 2 automatic game suspensions. In addition to the game misconduct, an automatic game suspension is imposed starting with the player's second fight of the season. This suspension is in addition to the sanction described in the preceding paragraphs." Close quote. So the way I think about this, Jacob, is the whole development of the brain, development of character, development of your game in general, when it comes to the QMJHL and getting their way to eventually the pros. But I don't think this means that fighting will eventually stop in the NHL. And plus, these guys in the queue will be watching as soon as their games are over, and they're going back to where they live. They're going to be turning on NHL hockey, and they're going to be looking at these fights. And also, it just comes down to this: once you are grown adults, you are responsible for your own. But also the whole I don't want to go. I guess it's the word culture with hockey is, if you take fighting out of the NHL and there is a big hit, and this will provide a lot of fuel for enforcers to put a dirty hit, even though by rule it would be clean. And I would think it would be a very dangerous place to be if you ban fighting from the NHL. I want to get your thoughts on this.
Yeah, so I think the ban on fighting at the sorry, it looks like I'm having a little bit of a connection issue. Can you still hear me?
I can still hear you. Go ahead, my friend.
Awesome. So yeah, I'm just saying that the ban on fighting at the junior level is completely separate from the ban at the NHL, from any potential ban at the NHL level. And I think in pro hockey at the NHL level, there's too much invested in star players. There's too much high end skill. Your entire franchise can ride on a select few players, and you have to protect them. And the rules of the game simply are not always going to be enough. Because if people violate the rules and they throw dirty hits or take cheap shots, then they have to answer for that in some way. So I think fighting will always have a place in the NHL, whether it's barbaric or damaging or could cause potential long-term issues. That's the unfortunate reality of it. But I do think it'll be there as almost as a policing mechanism in the sport. And players who do fight and do stand up for their teammates, they command great respect. And there's a we talk about the code in hockey, and there's a level of respect between combatants and fights in the NHL where the goal is never to severely injure anyone. It's usually to protect a teammate, to send a message of some kind, or in some cases it's two guys who have no bad blood at all. They just fight because that's what gets the attention of coaching staff. That's what gets the attention of teammates, and that's what gets the fans involved into a game at times. So there are guys who have no ill will or hatred towards anyone on the other side. They just fight because it's what the team needs at that time. So it will always have a place in the NHL, and I respect its place in the NHL. At the junior hockey level, I don't see a reason for it. I think it's overreactionary to say that this is a precursor to, we're going to ban fighting in hockey. I don't think that. The NCAA, college hockey, already does not allow fighting. It hasn't for a long time, and they don't even allow visors. That you have to wear a full face shield in NCAA hockey. Junior hockey in Canada has been far behind the NCAA in player safety for some time. Than college hockey players. Junior hockey has players that can range as young as 15 years old to as old as 20 years old. I don't think there's ever any reason for a 15 or 16-year-old to be in a bare knuckle fight against a 20-year-old man. There's no place for that. And I think it's for the safety of players. It's for the health of their still developing brains, because these are teenagers. If you think about a random sophomore in high school going up toe to toe on ice in a fist fight against a 20-year-old sophomore in college, that's what we have.
That is a disadvantage.
It is a massive disadvantage. And the thing is, players at that age are not necessarily looking out for their own safety, because a 16-year-old, especially males, scientifically are like not necessarily the smartest and will do reckless.
We're having a little bit of technical difficulties on Jacob's side. Oh, look at Jacob's back.
It's been in and out. We're having storms here. I'm in South Florida right now. The storms have been causing some issues. But if you can still hear me, yep. I feel like you have to take the safety out of the hands of 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20-year-olds and put it into the hands of people who have their well-being in their best interest. So I support the decision to ban fighting at the junior hockey level. And I don't think it's in any way threatening to the policing of the professional game. I think it's just, we're going to protect these guys at this age. And if they choose to fight, they'll at least be at full health, and they will at least be, they won't have the same risk associated with long-term damage if they decide to get into a fight.
Yeah. And when it comes to fighting at the junior hockey level and with the NHL level, you are also, for the junior hockey leagues, you are preventing possible lawsuits for possible long-term head trauma as well. And you are helping these kids get to that next step when they do go into the NHL, that they're not going in for as many bumps and bruises, especially to the head. And exactly. That when they do get to the NHL, their careers could possibly be longer, that's for sure. But we're going to transition over to segment number 3, where we're going to discuss more of the Florida Panthers and releasing their theme nights ahead of the 2023-24 season. We're going to be discussing that more here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast.
Your Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Third and final segment here on this Wednesday, August 16th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. Here with Jacob Winans for another edition of Winans Wednesday here. And Jacob, the Florida Panthers have released their theme nights for the 2023-24 season. Of course, there's the generic one like Hockey Fights Cancer, which will be on November 20th against the Oilers, Military Appreciation November 10th against the Carolina Hurricanes, Pride Night against the New Jersey Devils on January 13th, Star Wars Night, Vamos Gatos, Black History, St. Patrick's, Fan Appreciation. But of course, I also think some of them will be more enhanced this season for one reason, because the whole talk about the sound system improving at FLA Live Arena, at least supposedly being improved, and I think that will make these theme nights a little bit more exciting, a little bit more engaging. And it's funny because the one that's Cats and Cowboys, which is on December 2nd against New York Islanders, I'm not really a country music person, but I can only imagine how that would the music in between whistles of what could be played, like something like Blake Shelton, Brad Paisley, Kenny Chesney in between. And and with this, I'm actually very curious more of the acoustics of the arena as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think I'm I'm not a big country guy either, but I think they kind of dropped kind of thought like that, but I'm yeah, it's a tough one for me. It's a tough one for me. The theme nights here, but the sound system is definitely something that's been talked about a long time. Something that does need improvement. And the overall in game production as a whole is something that the Panthers have been. I don't want to say criticize necessarily, but from a home fan perspective, home fans have been, I guess, critical of the Panthers in game production, the sound system, the overall atmosphere that some other arenas have, and I think it does matter at the end of the day, because if you look at there's a game there, and they've taken great care in building a really hostile, high energy, difficult to play in environment, and that boils down to a lot of things besides just a passionate fan base. There's a lot that goes into that, and having things like a top tier sound system or excellent music choice that gets the crowd involved, things like that. I think that's really important. But the theme nights, there's definitely potential. There's definitely a lot of potential in these theme nights because looking at the list in front of me right now, there's a lot here that fans will gravitate to, and there's a lot you can bring in a lot of people this way. It's just if you're going to bring in people with these theme nights and bring people in on a topic or a hobby or something outside of hockey that they really enjoy, you have to make sure you do it right, and you have to do that production correctly, and you have to make sure that it's something that's lasting. On a personal note, with these theme nights, um, I personally have gotten friends, even my younger brothers who aren't super big hockey fans. I've gotten friends involved in Panthers hockey simply through Star Wars night. Um, People who don't even necessarily like hockey, you tell them there's a Star Wars night, they'll show up. Everyone is there in costume and everything's Star Wars themed, and people just love it. I've gotten people to go to games because it was Halloween time, and the Panthers had a Halloween theme night, and they did one of their team intros was the Purge themed, and they absolutely loved it. Ended up sitting through watching the entire game. The Panthers won. They became fans. It sometimes is as simple as that if executed properly. So that's my take on theme nights as a whole. But when executed properly, it is a really great tool to increase the fan base, and it's something that, as in the Panthers market, is something that we have to take seriously.
Yeah, I can only imagine on Star Wars night, the Panthers are probably going to put the Stormtrooper helmet back as their logo, and they're facing the Minnesota Wild on that night, January 19th. And I can maybe imagine Chewbacca as something related to Minnesota Wild, maybe. And there's another one, Whiteout Night, on March 21st against the Nashville Predators. And it's funny because you think of Paul Maurice coaching the Winnipeg Jets for 8 seasons and them having their whiteout. But here's the thing about the Winnipeg Jets during the postseason with their whiteout. They don't wear their road uniforms at home, even though it's a whiteout. So when I think of whiteout with and NHL is different. NHL and NFL are the same when it comes to dark jerseys are the home team, unless you're like the Dolphins or even the Dallas Cowboys. But but they switched it to dark in 02-03. But actually, I believe a few years ago, the Panthers actually had a home game where they wore their white jerseys against the Carolina Hurricanes at home. And actually last season, they wore their home jerseys against the Anaheim Ducks when they wore their reverse retro jerseys. So I would like to see a full-blown whiteout, as in the Panthers actually wearing maybe, and even if it's not their road jerseys, maybe a theme jersey as well that night. There was no announcement there in regard to that as well. So that's something I'd like to see. Also, the Panthers announced that there'll be mini bobblehead giveaways November 6th against the Columbus Blue Jackets, December 6th against the Dallas Stars, and January 17th against the Detroit Red Wings. They didn't say who was going to be which bobblehead will be released that night, but it's 10,000 fans. First 10,000 will be getting bobbleheads, but there was a picture of Barkov, Tkachuk, and Ekblad. So I'm assuming it's a combination of the three, but didn't say who on which night. But I also want to go back to the whole 30th anniversary celebration for the Cats, because we're going to continue talking about the 30th anniversary. There's no announcement on what's going to happen, but I like to see a lot of fan interactions from guys from 90s, 2000s, and 2010s to now. The Marlins do a great job with this when it comes to fan interactions, like tents to like tables to go line up for fans to go get autographs or something like that, or a picture stand as well for that. And also we spoke about mini bobblehead nights for current Panthers. Why not a bobblehead nights for as far as like a throwback edition? Because this is the 30th anniversary. You got to go big here. And this is and especially when you're coming off your 4 straight postseason appearance and coming off your first Stanley Cup final in 27 years. Like I think that should be something that the Panthers really, really need to take advantage of in their 30th anniversary celebration.
I'm 100% in agreement with you on that. It was kind of a running joke for a couple seasons there, but when the Panthers had their 25th anniversary, the theme on all the promo commercials and everything was Sasha Barkov saying 25 years and we're just getting started. It became quite a joke when the Panthers were not as successful in the season as expected, and it became 26 years and we're just getting started. 27 years and we're just getting started. We're not in that position anymore. It's 30 years now. There's a lot to celebrate. The Panthers are coming off a President's Trophy winning too. So I hope the Panthers like really, really embrace that. I think 30 years, it's a big milestone, especially for a team like the Panthers, where there were times where we thought we could be relocated, or where the Panthers looked like a franchise that was not going to be financially viable, or could fold, or have to be sold. There's a lot to be proud of with where the Panthers stand right now at 30 years, and I think they should embrace that. The 25th anniversary season, I felt like there was a lot to be desired as far as promoting that and taking advantage of that and celebrating that. They did some things. They had a really, really epic intro video that included like past and present Panthers, which I thought was really cool at the time. I love the idea of bringing in Panther alumni and former players and incorporating them into this season, because I think during the Panthers playoff run and during the Panthers President's Trophy season, a year prior, I think the former Panthers, past Panthers, guys who played for the Panthers at one time that didn't get to enjoy that success as Panthers, and then even the ones who did, members of that 96 team, everybody who has ever really put on that Panthers uniform really got behind this group. And I think now is a great time at 30 years to incorporate them into the past of the team, but also the future. And I'm excited to see what they do with it. I would have loved a 30th anniversary, like alternate uniform or something like that. That would have been really cool. The NHL can be a little bit strict on jerseys and stuff, but as much as you can do for a 30th anniversary, it's huge. You have to go all out for that. It's a massive milestone, especially for this franchise. So I think with the ultimate goal of winning a Stanley Cup in year 30, I think there's a lot to celebrate and a lot to look forward to as far as this season goes. But definitely get some alumni bobbleheads. I would love that. Sign me up, please.
Yeah. And especially because we now have new fans in this fan base because of the run they went on. Because they didn't also they get little bits of history lessons too because of their recent success. And also let's give credit to the guys who have been there from the start, who have been through the turmoil of this franchise and the dark years of a decade plus playoff drought as well. So got to give credit to those guys as well who might want to meet the guys that they cheered for even as kids as well. So hope the Panthers make that happen. But Jacob, I want to thank you so much for joining me on this Wednesday edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Another successful Winans Wednesday for you and I, my friend. Tell everybody where they can follow you.
Yep, you can follow me on X, formerly Twitter at Jacob Winans 8. And yeah, thank you as always for having me. We'll see what happens next week. This time next week, I'll be on a flight to Asia, but we will. We'll definitely get an episode set up overseas.
No doubt. Thank you so much, my friend. See you next week.
See you.
And if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on the Locked On NHL network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey with Flip Livingstone and Steer Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. So I'm Armando Velez with Jacob Winans. And you've been listening to Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.